Everyone's been talking about prompt engineering. Is it cool? Is it necessary? Is it going to go away? But here's the dirty little secret about prompting LLMs. It's not just LLMs that need to be prompted. People need to be prompted. I'll take a step back here. A long time ago, I went to the movie theater with my brother, and he was like, "Hey, do you want some popcorn? We should get some drinks." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's get some popcorn." And then he started sort of like digging through his pockets or whatever, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Googling for the movie ticket stub." And I just started laughing. I was like, Googling. He was searching for the movie ticket stub, right? And so he was kind of used the word Google as a proxy for search. And I've noticed people started using the word prompting for people. He's like, can you give me what the prompt is for this? Or you make sure you prompt them in the right way. And it occurs to me that we prompt people all the time, and the way you prompt them changes their behavior dramatically. So let me give you a very concrete example of this. If you say to a lawyer, is there any risk in doing X? The lawyer will say, yes, here's all the reasons not to do X. Because that's their responsibility. That's their duty of care. If you say to them, we are doing X, I need you to limit the risks of the downside from X, then they will help you figure out how to limit the risk downsides of X. And the conversation is radically different. And for most people, most of the time, most teams, most well-meaning operators, the first prompt will derail them from going down that path. They go, oh shit, that's a lot of risk. The second prompt will engage in a conversation of minimizing risk and executing the thing anyway. The same is true for LLMs. And the problem with this, or the opportunity with this, is that most people, most of the time, do not know how to ask the right question and do not know how to craft the right prompts for each other, much less of the universe or for LLMs. And so all the way back to our age-old debate, discussion, passion, Yaniv, you and I, it ends up being about craft, taste, judgment, experience.
And communication.
And communication. I love that. And so the very best operators become even better. They become superheroes. While the people who struggle with all of these things, including communication, sadly get left behind. And so we need just to go on a bit of a rant there for a second, our education system needs to catch up here. And our kids need to be taught how to think about thinking, how to think about prompting, how to think about asking the right questions of the universe, much less LLMs, to become effective operators in this new world.
I agree. And, the way to think about AI tooling is imagine you've got an army of 1,000 super knowledgeable, super smart, but not particularly clever, not particularly sensible junior employees, right? And if you know how to leverage those, if you know how to instruct those junior employees to do the things you want them to do, you get superpowers. But if you just give them vague tasks, they will go and execute them, because we know that AI lacks humility, right? That's what all the hallucination and stuff is about, right? If you give it vague instructions, they will execute those vague instructions. But in the vagueness, in the lack of specificity, you will find a lot of undesirable behavior. So yes, it is in the prompting. And we talked about communication, Chris. Just one thing I wanted to add, which is it's increasingly about written communication. So we're actually, in the next few weeks, we're releasing an episode of the Startup Podcast EDU with an ex-executive at Amazon who wrote a whole book about their PRFAQ written communication process. Amazon is famous for writing things down. I think writing things down from early on is becoming more and more important, because that is how you feed the context into the LLMs that allows them to give you those superpowers. So again, everything old is new again. I think written documentation is sexy again.
Yeah, and just good old communication is useful again. We can't, all the internet abbreviations and memes and all of the illiterate kids who only know how to talk in TikTok. It's problematic. Now, we may, in a few years' time, we may look back at this episode and realize, oh my God, we're such old fuddy-duddies. Our AIs are deeply intuitive, deeply predictive of our needs and behaviors, deeply able to read between the lines and be, great adversarial debaters, discussers, and operators. And this episode will date very poorly, but we'll see. At least in the short to medium term, this is very much true.
So we're just talking about how the education system really needs to get up to date and help people become the sorts of people who can control AIs, who can instruct and prompt and leverage AIs. But I was drawn to this story that's come out about the amount of people using ChatGPT, students using ChatGPT in the education system. This is a report that came out from Axios that talks about the fact that 90% of college students used AI tools like ChatGPT for assignments as early as January 2023. Among teens, usage has doubled since then. Now, 25% of them are using ChatGPT for assignments. Frankly, I think that's an underestimate. Schools are trying to use these AI detection tools, which are fundamentally broken, right? Like it's actually impossible. Like they have some amount of ability to detect AI, but there are both plenty of false positives and false negatives. Some schools are trying to think about how do we shift towards teaching responsible AI use and so on. So I do think there is a brewing crisis here. And I just wanted to make an important distinction before we dive in here, Chris. We're talking about how important it is for people to know how to use AI. And now I'm saying, oh, we've got this brewing crisis in education because students are using AI to do their assignments. And I think there are two very different things that are a massively important distinction. One is outsourcing your thinking to AI, right? That's what a lot of these students are doing. They're taking a prompt, which is the assignment prompt that's been given to them by their teacher, feeding it into AI and turning in the result, right? And that is cheating, first of all. But also, as a student, you're learning nothing. And so you're not gaining those valuable skills. Whereas what we were talking about in the previous segment, Chris, was learning those critical thinking skills, learning that sort of way of expressing yourself and understanding the problem domain and so on, so that you can feed it into the AI and get massive leverage on your executive function. So one is outsourcing to the AI. You're in a sense excluding yourself from the system. You've made yourself useless. And that's what a lot of these students are doing. They're not learning. They're not using AI in any meaningful way. They're just feeding a prompt into it that they didn't even write. And the other is gaining massive leverage by knowing how to use AI effectively. And that's what we need to be teaching in schools. And that's ironically what this AI tool usage is precisely undermining, that type of critical thinking problem definition that is actually going to be the most valuable skill for the current generation of students.
Let me give you a counter argument to this. There's a lot of kids that you meet in school or maybe met in your high school who are super lazy, but because of their laziness and their pragmatism, actually end up being really, really smart, really effective entrepreneurs who found the best, shortest path from here to there. And you can kind of just think back to all of the hardworking kids who understood how to become part of the institution and part of the bureaucracy and became really great little worker bees. And if you asked any of my teachers back at school, is Chris a good student? They would say, Chris is really smart, but he's really fucking lazy and doesn't pay attention.
I still say that.
Yaniv still says that. And the fact is because I was bored. I thought it was bureaucratic. I thought it was mostly nonsense. And I was too busy dreaming up my own startups and my own work. And I didn't want to go to college and I didn't want to go fit into the worker bee culture. And so you have to be careful about the people who are finding shortcuts from calling them, potentially ineffective or lazy, because they may be the ones who actually know how to lean on the AI the most. And let me just give you one last example, and maybe I'm just justifying my own laziness. I now just give every contract to ChatGPT and I just ask it, is there any reason why I shouldn't sign this contract? and it just like summarizes all of the, adversarial stuff and all the reasons why it's hostile to me. And I don't read the fucking contract. I just ask ChatGPT to tell me what's wrong with it.
That's fine because you're not a contract lawyer, right? If you're at university studying to be a contract lawyer and that's how you do it, well, guess what? You've done yourself out of a job because ChatGPT is doing all the work. You've learned nothing about contract law or how to review a contract. And I think that's the problem. And that's the difference.
There aren't going to be any contract lawyers left, Yaniv.
That's a different point, right? So what do we teach? What do we teach is a set of skills. And the skill is not, hey, I've been given an assignment by my teacher. I'm going to put it into ChatGPT. I'm going to take the output and submit it as my own work, because you've learned precisely nothing then. You have acquired no skills. And, so I think that means that the type of work that is being assigned to people needs to change. And, I think about, I'm in my 40s. When I was at school, the big debate was about whether students should be allowed to use calculators. For the young kids, a calculator is like a phone, except the only thing it can do is add and multiply numbers. Of course, learning arithmetic, learning how to add, learning how to multiply is actually a really core skill. And so, where things have settled is you don't allow calculators in primary school when learning those fundamental skills is actually really important, because then you won't learn them. But in high school, once those skills have been learned and you're applying arithmetic to higher order problems, you can effectively prompt the calculator with that sum and it will do it for you. And so that's where things have settled in general, right? Calculators are permitted in higher years, but not in earlier years. And I feel it's the same thing, right? Actually, Chris, I wanted to, this is something that I don't know if I'm coining it. I think I might be because I haven't seen it. And again, I'm in Steve Jobs mode at the moment in his little world. And one of the things, very humanistic things to our earlier point that Steve Jobs said about his computers in the 80s, in the early days, is he said he sees a computer as being like a bicycle for the mind, right? So in other words, it's not replacing the human mind. What is a bicycle? It's something that takes human muscle power and allows you to apply it more efficiently to go at a higher speed with less energy expenditure, but you're still putting in your own muscle power. So he saw a computer as a bicycle for the mind. What I think AI is it's a freaking race car for the mind, right? Like we've taken that bicycle for the mind thing and saying, okay, now you're getting even more for your brain power, but you still have to apply the brain power to get the value from it. Otherwise, you're putting yourself into irrelevance, right? And so the question is, okay, so if a computer is a bicycle for the mind, maybe a calculator is a skateboard for the mind. Now we have this race car for the mind. How do we bring that into school so that people still learn those actual skills? They're still applying their mental power. They're still developing those mental skills that allow them to drive that thing effectively.
All right, those are our thoughts on AI and education, but we want to know what you think. So jump down in the comments and let us know your thoughts.